Hi, I'm Walter Novoa, Solutions Architect at Microsoft, and today I'm gonna be talking about functions calling in Azure OpenAI services. Gen AI models are very good at understanding and producing human-like text by analyzing huge datasets of human conversations. This enables them to suggest actions based on user requests, so they can execute tasks beyond text generation. Azure OpenAI improved this by introducing function calling, a feature that allows models to identify what functions within your solution, including the necessary parameters, should be called to complete a user request. This bridges GPT with applications, allowing us as developers to integrate model suggestions directly into actionable tasks within our systems, streamlining in this way the interaction between AI generated advice and application execution. Let's see how this works. In a conventional interaction with ChatGPT, we take the prompt from the user into our application and then we send it to the OpenAI service to generate an answer in natural language. Once we get it, we send it back to the user. While this is very useful for most cases, there are scenarios when we need to give the user an answer whose elaboration requires the execution of one or more actions. We could identify these actions before with the help of the model by enhancing the user prompt with complex instructions. But now, thanks to functions calling, we have an easier and more structured way to get that information from the model. With function calling, we can take the user prompt and just need to add the list of functions available in our application. This list goes as a JSON inside the tool's parameter when calling the OpenAI API. We'll see that in detail during the demo. When we have complemented the user prompt with our list of functions or tools, we send this new object to OpenAI. And when OpenAI detects that there are tools to evaluate, it analyzes the user's prompt, and if it concludes that to fulfill the user prompt we need to execute one or more of the functions in the payload, it will generate a response that will tell us what functions with their parameters are required to be executed. With this response, we should be able to execute those functions normally from our application. Usually, each function execution will also have its results, and we will gather all of those results and then assemble a new message for the conversation we are having with OpenAI. And OpenAI will then use those results to generate a final answer in natural language for the user. Now, let's see how all of this theory looks in action using a Python notebook for this case. Okay, we are gonna be working with this Python notebook using Visual Studio Code. This notebook is available at my GitHub, so you can go there and check it out. And well, here we just start with some imports, nothing special here, just noting that we are going to work with the Azure OpenAI client. Then I have this external services simulation that will allow us to serve as sample services that we could call using the recommendations that OpenAI give to us. For example, I have this function to get the weather in a given location, and this other is similar, but also have a span of days that we want to check the weather. And then I have this helper function that will allow us to see in a very clear way what are the functions and the parameters that OpenAI is recommending to us. And here we have the OpenAI client setup. We are going to use an API key, the version. You can see that we can use the latest version that we have in Azure OpenAI services for this client. And also we will need the endpoint that your Azure OpenAI resource will give you when you create it. Um, Remember that in Azure OpenAI services, we also need the deployment name that will indicate what specific model are we going to use for this sample. We are going to need also a function that will be the color of the functions that OpenAI recommends us to execute. That's the reason that we have this function color here. We're going to see the details about this function in a while. And here we have the method that actually communicates with OpenAI. It receives the prompt from the user uh, as well as the tools that we have made available from within our application. So it could analyze, given the prompt and this set of functions, what of those functions will be required to be executed. Here you can see how we describe the functions that our application are exposing to OpenAI so it can analyze them and then choose what of those functions must be executed. And these functions are just written using the format of a JSON schema, and they made part of an array called tools. And basically, you have the name of the function, its description, and the parameters that the function uses to work. It is very important to use descriptive names for your functions and also very good descriptions, because this is the text that OpenAI uses to feed and know what function to use given a specific prompt from the user, right? So the more descriptive you make the name or the descriptions, the more clues or information you are going to give to OpenAI, so you will be getting the best results in that way. If you see that something is not working well when you actually execute uh, these instructions, maybe you can come here and make some tools tuning. You can rewrite some things, some descriptions, some names. This is basically prompt engineering, and then you will get better results for your calls to OpenAI. And look, for example, how I can define what is going to be the default value for a parameter just in plain text in natural language. So there is nothing very prescriptive here. You can be very creative here in order to get the best results with OpenAI. And here we have the first test. It is like the happy path because the user is given the name of the city for which he wants to know the weather. Observe how I have set up the system prompt. I am not letting the system to make assumptions about the values of the parameters. And if there is any doubt, the system will need to ask for clarification if there is any ambiguity in the user request. So let's debug this, and uh, let's print what did the assistant answered here. And well, you can see that there is no content for the current interaction, so there is no message for the user here, but there is a field here called tool calls, and it contains all the functions that should be called to answer the request from the user. In this case, there is only one function. Here is the function that it is being recommended by OpenAI, and also it have extracted the parameters that are required to this execution. Let's pretty print this to have more clarity about this answer. So content null, and the function that we need to call is going to be get current weather, the first one that I have shown before, and the arguments, they are going to be San Francisco and Fahrenheit. And here observe that we are calling the function caller, passing as parameters the list of functions that OpenAI returned. And what this function does is basically uh, make some kind of dictionary of the name of the functions and the functions themselves. And then for each function that come in the array of functions or tools, it will get the name, retrieve the name, and then will identify what function to call with what parameters. And then for each case, it will assemble the execution here and get the response. And this response will be appended to the messages in the conversation that we are having with OpenAI. So in that way, OpenAI will have the required information to then assemble a natural language answer for the user. So that answer is produced here with the chat completions create method. Observe how we pass the messages updated with the results from calling the functions externally. So here you can notice that OpenAI just give us the functions that we need to call, but OpenAI is not executing those functions. We are responsible of making those executions, and that is good because we have the control and the flexibility to make the executions uh, as we want, right? So the response will be finally what the user is asking for. So let's execute that step in our debugging. And here you have it. The current temperature in San Francisco is 72. That is what is hardwired at the beginning, 72 for San Francisco. Let's see another test to help us understand a little bit more about the use of function calling. In this case, we are not giving the location for finding the weather, so the parameters are ambiguous here, and ChatGPT should detect that and then produce a content, in this case, for us to ask again to the user for those parameters. Let's see what happens. Here, the content, it says that, sure, I can help you with that, but give me a location, please. And functions is none, because as we don't have any parameter, we we don't know what function to call here. We need to first be sure about what parameters are we going to use. Let's continue the conversation here and specify that the user answered, I'm in Paris. So with this answer, let's see what happens with ChatGPT. Now the content is null, and ChatGPT have enough information to know that we need get current weather with Paris and Celsius. But if the user maybe prefer Fahrenheit, and if the user specifies that in his prompt, let's see what happens. You see, now OpenAI is giving us the updated answer, and it will be very helpful for our application and obviously for our end user. Now let's test the other function, the one that will ask for the temperature in a span of days. Here, I am asking how will be the weather in Cartagena for the next week, and observe how the function has changed. Now is get and day weather forecast, and the arguments are Cartagena, Fahrenheit, and look this, very good, 7 days as the user indicated he needed the forecast for a whole week. And after calling the function, the result is this. Another very important concept here is parallel function calling. Suppose that the user wants to know the weather not only in San Francisco but also in Bogota. This will require that the application call two different functions for a single prompt. And this is why this is called parallel function calling, because uh, the answer from ChatGPT will give us not only one function to execute but more than one. Let's see how OpenAI answers to this kind of interactions. Now, it gave us two functions, obviously each one with its own set of parameters. And then we have here the answer of calling each one of these functions. And you could notice how OpenAI have organized the answer in a very natural way with this connection that is very simple to see for an end user. Well, and that will be all for an introduction of function calling in Azure OpenAI services. Remember that all the code is in GitHub. You can access it and play with it, so you could make a better idea on how to use this great feature and how to integrate it in your applications and solutions to get the best out of these advantages that Azure OpenAI services offers today. Thanks a lot for your time. Bye.